The sky over Geneva was gray that morning, the kind of overcast that made the city feel smaller than it was. Inside the United Earth Council chamber, the air was thick with tension. Delegates from every continent sat in silence, eyes fixed on the massive screen at the front of the room. What they had just watched replay 3 times was not a message of peace. It was a declaration of war. The transmission had arrived without warning 2 days earlier. No handshake, no introduction, no attempt at diplomacy. Just a cold, metallic voice speaking in flawless English, backed by images of a vast alien armada moving through star systems like a storm. The speaker called itself High Arbiter Vex of the Cathar hegemony. It claimed dominion over more than 200 star systems and accused Earth of violating galactic sovereignty protocols by expanding beyond its home planet. The ultimatum was clear. Within 30 solar days, humanity must dismantle all off-world colonies, surrender its spacefaring vessels, and accept planetary quarantine under Cathar supervision. Failure to comply would result in total systemic neutralization. Most of the council members were pale. Some whispered prayers. Others stared blankly at their hands, as if trying to remember what normal life felt like just a week ago. Outside, the world was already unraveling. News networks broadcast the message on endless loops. Stock markets crashed. Crowds gathered in city squares, some in fear, others in anger. Governments scrambled to issue statements, but none had answers. Earth had dreamed of meeting alien life for centuries. Now that it had happened, it felt less like a miracle and more like a death sentence. But not everyone was afraid. Deep beneath the ice of Antarctica, in a facility so secret it didn't appear on any map, Frank Dawson leaned back in his chair and let out a low chuckle. He was a retired colonel, broad-shouldered and silver-haired, with eyes that had seen too many drills and too few real fights. On the screen in front of him, the Cathar message played again. The alien's voice was sharp, arrogant, full of certainty. Frank turned to the woman beside him. "They really think we're just sitting ducks out here," he said. Lena Ortiz didn't look up from her console. Her fingers danced across the holographic interface, pulling up data streams from deep space sensors. She was in her early 40s, sharp-minded and calm under pressure, with dark hair pulled into a messy bun and a coffee stain on her lab coat. "They scanned our solar system," she said quietly. "Saw our colonies on Mars, the shipyards near Luna, the mining rigs in the belt, but they didn't see what's underneath." Frank nodded. They both knew what she meant. For over 50 years, Earth had been preparing. Not for invasion, not for conquest, but for the moment someone underestimated them. After the discovery of alien wreckage near Pluto in 2089, humanity had made a quiet choice. Instead of shouting their findings to the stars, they buried them. They studied. They built. They waited. Project Longbow wasn't just a weapons program. It was a promise to never be caught unready again. Lena finally turned to face Frank. "Their fleet is massive. Over 300 ships. But their shield harmonics are locked to a single frequency. Their comms use predictable burst patterns. And their propulsion? It's efficient, but slow to adjust in tight formations." She paused. "They fight like an empire that hasn't lost a battle in centuries." "Which means they've forgotten what losing feels like," Frank said. Above them, the world panicked. But down here, in the cold heart of the ice, there was no panic. Only focus. Engineers moved through corridors lined with humming reactors. Technicians calibrated weapons that had never been fired in anger. Scientists reviewed simulations that showed how a single well-placed strike could collapse an enemy's entire formation. None of this existed on paper. None of it was known to the public. Even most world leaders had only vague hints of what lay beneath Antarctica. Frank stood and walked to the observation window. Beyond the reinforced glass, the Valkyrie rested in its cradle, a sleek black warship unlike anything Earth had ever shown the stars. It was powered by a captured alien core, wrapped in human engineering, armed with weapons that bent physics in ways even Lena didn't fully understand. It wasn't just a ship. It was a statement. "They gave us 30 days, Frank said. "They think that's mercy," Lena replied. "But it's a gift. It gives us time to wake up the rest of the network." She was right. Hidden across the solar system were dormant platforms, on the far side of the moon, buried in Ceres, floating in the shadow of Saturn's rings. All of them carried longbow tech. All of them were now receiving silent activation codes. In the next few hours, Earth's true defense grid would come online, Not with fanfare, but with a whisper. Back in Geneva, the council voted to send a reply. A plea for more time, a request for dialogue, a hope for peace. It was the right thing to do, the human thing. But Frank knew the truth. The Cathar didn't want to talk. They wanted submission, and Earth had stopped being the kind of place that submitted a long time ago. Later that night, Frank stood alone in the command center. The lights were dim. The only sound was the soft hum of life support and the distant thrum of geothermal generators deep below. He thought about his grandson, playing in a park in Denver, unaware that the sky above him might soon burn with alien fire. He thought about farmers in Kenya, students in Jakarta, fishermen in Chile, all of them living ordinary lives while an empire from the stars decided their fate. But Earth had never been ordinary. Frank smiled. Not a wide grin, just a small, quiet curl of the lips. The kind of smile that comes when you've been waiting for something for a very long time. And it's finally here. Up in orbit, a sensor pinged. The first Cathar scout ship had crossed the edge of the Oort cloud. It wouldn't reach Jupiter for another 3 weeks. To the rest of humanity, that was a countdown to doom. To Frank, Lena, and the silent network waking up across the solar system, it was a countdown to something else entirely. The aliens had declared war, and Earth, for the first time in generations, was ready to fight back. While the world held its breath, Earth moved in silence. Governments issued calming statements. News anchors repeated the same worried lines. Crowds gathered in cities, lighting candles or shouting slogans, unsure whether to pray or prepare. But beneath the surface, both literal and political, a different kind of work had already begun. The panic above meant nothing down here. Here, in hidden places scattered across the solar system, humanity was arming itself not with fear but with focus. Deep under the Antarctic ice, Project Longbow shifted from standby to full activation. Frank Dawson walked the corridors with steady steps, his boots echoing against metal floors. He wasn't in uniform anymore, but everyone treated him like he was. Engineers nodded as he passed. Technicians paused their work just long enough to meet his eyes. They all knew what was coming. And they all knew Frank had been right to wait. Lena Ortiz stood in the central control room, surrounded by floating screens showing real-time data from every corner of human space. Her fingers moved quickly, adjusting energy flows, syncing weapon calibrations, and monitoring the slow but steady rise of power in the Valkyrie's core. The ship was no longer just a prototype. It was alive. Its systems hummed with a low, steady pulse that felt almost like a heartbeat. Lena had helped design half of those systems. She knew their limits, their quirks, their secrets, and she knew they were ready. "They've finished the final test on the resonance cannons," she said as Frank entered the room. "All 3 arrays are synced to the same quantum frequency. One shot should punch through any shield the Cathar use." Frank nodded. "Good, but we won't fire unless we have to." Lena looked at him. "You think they'll back down?" "No," Frank said. "But I want them to understand this isn't a fight they walked into by accident. We're giving them every chance to turn around, even if we know they won't." Far away on the moon, another kind of work was happening. Inside a crater on the far side, hidden from Earth's view, engineer Jake Mullins wiped grease from his forehead and checked the last connection on the orbital defense grid. The platform looked like a tangle of old satellite parts from the outside, but inside it housed gravitic pulse emitters and cloaking fields stolen from alien tech and rebuilt with human hands. Jake had spent 10 years working on this grid, never telling his family what he really did. Now, as he powered up the main reactor, he finally understood why the secrecy had been worth it. "Grid Alpha is online," he said into his comm. "Shield harmonics stable. Weapon systems green." Back on Earth, in a bunker beneath the Rocky Mountains, command staff watched as dozens of similar signals blinked to life across the solar system. Platforms in the asteroid belt, drones hidden in Martian dust storms, even old mining stations near Neptune, all of them were waking up. None of them broadcast their presence. None of them made a sound. They simply existed, waiting. The Cathar had assumed humanity was alone. They had scanned for fleets, for weapons factories, for military bases. But they hadn't looked deep enough. They hadn't considered that a species that spent centuries fighting itself might learn eventually how to hide its strength until the right moment. Frank stood beside Lena as she pulled up a simulation on the main screen. It showed the Cathar fleet entering the outer solar system, moving in perfect formation, confident and slow. Then in the simulation, hidden platforms fired. Mines detonated in empty space, not with explosions, but with distortions in gravity that twisted ship trajectories. EMP bursts knocked out comms. And then the Valkyrie appeared, fast, silent, deadly, cutting through the formation like a knife. They rely on coordination, Lena explained. Break their links, scatter their ships, and they become easy targets. Their tech is advanced but rigid. Ours is messy, unpredictable, human. Frank smiled faintly. That's our advantage. They expect logic. We'll give them chaos. Meanwhile, in Geneva, the United Earth Council debated how to respond to the Cathar's latest message, a blunt reminder that only 25 days remained. Some leaders argued for surrender, saying resistance would only bring faster destruction. Others pushed for a show of force, even if it was symbolic. But none of them knew about Longbow. Only a handful of people in the highest levels of global security had clearance, and even they didn't know the full scope. That was by design. Secrecy wasn't just about surprise, it was about control. If the public knew Earth had weapons capable of fighting back, panic might turn into reckless hope. And hope, unchecked, could be just as dangerous as fear. But down in Antarctica, hope wasn't reckless. It was calculated. Every bolt, every circuit, every line of code had been tested, retested, and refined. The Valkyrie wasn't just a warship. It was the result of generations of quiet work by scientists, engineers, and soldiers who believed that one day, someone would come knocking. And when they did, Earth wouldn't beg. It would answer. Jake Mullins finished his checks on the lunar grid and stepped outside the airlock just for a moment. The moon's surface stretched before him, silent and still. Above Earth hung in the black sky, blue, fragile, beautiful. He thought about his little sister back in Houston, who loved stargazing and always asked him if aliens were real. He never told her yes. Not until now. Back in the control room, Lena received a new alert. A Cathar probe had entered the asteroid belt. It was small and armed, just scanning, but it was a scout. The real fleet wouldn't be far behind. Time to go dark, she said. With a few keystrokes, every longbow platform across the solar system activated its cloaking fields. Sensors went passive. Power levels dropped to near zero. To any outside observer, the system looked empty again, just rocks, dust, and silence. But beneath that calm surface, Earth was coiled like a spring. Frank watched the screen as the probe drifted past a hidden minefield near Ceres. It didn't detect a thing. He turned to Lena. They think they're hunting prey. She met his gaze. Let them keep thinking that. In the days that followed, the world above continued to tremble, but below, in ice and rock and shadow, humanity prepared not for survival, but for victory. The Cathar had made one mistake. They assumed Earth was what it appeared to be, a young, scattered species barely out of its cradle. They didn't know that cradles can hide claws. They didn't know that silence can be a weapon. And they certainly didn't know that sometimes a smile isn't a sign of weakness, but of patience finally coming to an end. The Cathar arrived early. Their main fleet crossed the orbit of Jupiter 12 days before the deadline, a wall of dark metal and pulsing energy that blotted out the stars behind it. To the telescopes of Earth's civilian observatories, it looked like a storm rolling in, slow, massive, unstoppable. Panic surged through cities. People packed bags, kissed loved ones, or simply sat in silence watching the sky. But in the hidden command centers beneath the ice, in the silent platforms on the moon, and aboard the Valkyrie drifting near Ganymede, there was no panic. Only readiness. Frank Dawson stood on the bridge of the Valkyrie, his hands clasped behind his back. The ship was dark, running on minimal power, its hull wrapped in a cloaking field that bent light and sensors alike. Around him, crew members moved with quiet precision. Lena Ortiz was at the science station, eyes locked on the incoming data stream. Jake Mullins was down in engineering, making last-minute adjustments to the gravitic drive. Everyone knew what came next. No speeches were needed. No grand declarations. Just work. The Cathar fleet moved in perfect formation, hundreds of ships gliding in synchronized lines. They broadcast a new message as they entered the inner system. A final warning. Surrender is your only path to survival. The voice was the same as before, cold and certain. It echoed across every public channel, every news feed, every comm device on Earth. But Frank didn't listen. He watched the tactical display instead. They're scanning, Lena said softly. looking for resistance. For fleets, for weapons. Let them look, Frank replied. And then without warning the first strike happened, not from the Valkyrie but from the asteroid belt. Hidden platforms dormant for decades unleashed a barrage of gravitic mines. They didn't explode. Instead, they warped space itself, creating sudden pockets of distorted gravity. 3 Cathar destroyers veered off course, colliding with each other in a silent crash of twisted metal. Alarms blared across the alien fleet. Comms scrambled. For the first time, their perfect formation cracked. Before they could recover, EMP pulses fired from lunar craters. Not strong enough to destroy, but enough to blind. Sensors flickered. Navigation systems glitched. In that moment of confusion, the Valkyrie struck. It dropped out of cloak behind Ganymede, engines flaring to life. Its quantum resonance cannons charged in under 3 seconds. The first shot hit a Cathar cruiser square in the shield generator. The alien shielding, tuned to a single harmonic frequency, shattered like glass. The second shot tore through the hull. The third turned the ship into a cloud of debris. On the bridge, Jake's voice crackled over the comm. "Drive's holding. We can do this again." "Do it," Frank said. The Valkyrie banked hard, weaving through the chaos it had created. It fired twice more, crippling 2 more ships before vanishing back into cloak near the orbit of Europa. The Cathar, stunned and disoriented, began firing blindly into empty space. Their weapons lit up the void with streaks of blue energy, but they hit nothing. Earth's defenders weren't playing by their rules. Back in Antarctica, Lena coordinated the next phase. She sent silent commands to the orbital grids, adjusting their timing, feeding real-time data from the Valkyrie's sensors. Every Cathar ship that fired revealed its position. Every burst of comms gave away its frequency. Lena used that information to update the minefields, the EMP emitters, the drone swarms hidden in Saturn's rings. Earth wasn't fighting with one weapon. It was fighting with the whole system. The Cathar admiral aboard the massive command vessel at the heart of the fleet demanded answers. "Where are their ships?" he roared. "Where is their fleet?" But there was no fleet. Not in the way he understood it. No lines of battleships. No carriers launching fighters. Just traps, tricks, and one black ship that appeared and disappeared like a ghost. Frank watched the tactical map as the enemy began to regroup. They were pulling tighter, forming a defensive sphere around their command ship. Predictable. Arrogant. They still believed this was a battle they could win with numbers alone. "Time to give them a reason to chase us," Frank said. He ordered the Valkyrie to broadcast. A fake distress signal. A human emergency beacon, weak and broken. As if a civilian ship had been caught in the crossfire. It was a lie, but a good one. Within minutes, a Cathar strike group broke off from the main fleet and headed toward Mars, where the signal appeared to originate. Exactly as planned. Hidden beneath the red dust of Mars, 5 longbow drone nests powered on. They had been buried there since the first colony was built, disguised as old water reclamation units. Now as the Cathar ships descended, the drones launched, not with missiles but with focused sonic disruptors that vibrated at the same frequency as the alien shield cores. One by one, the Cathar ships lost their shields. Then the orbital grids near Phobos opened fire. The strike group was wiped out in under 90 seconds. On Earth, people saw the flashes in the sky. They didn't know what they meant. Some thought it was the beginning of the end. Others whispered that maybe, just maybe, Earth wasn't going down without a fight. Frank didn't celebrate. He knew this was only the opening move. The Cathar still had hundreds of ships, but they were no longer confident. They were angry, and anger made them careless. He turned to Lena. "Begin phase 2. Draw them toward the inner belt." She nodded and sent the command. Across the solar system, decoy signals activated. Fake power surges near Venus. Phantom ship signatures near Mercury. Even a simulated reactor meltdown on a derelict station near the Sun. The Cathar, desperate to find the source of the attacks, took the bait. Their fleet split, sending wings toward each false lead, and in the gaps they left behind, the real weapons waited. Jake reported from engineering. "We're at 98% charge on all systems. Ready for another run." Frank looked out the viewport. The stars were calm. The void was quiet. But soon, it would burn. "Then let's show them what happens," he said, "when you wake up a planet that's been sleeping on purpose." The Valkyrie powered up, engines humming with restrained power. Cloaking field disengaged, and Earth, for the first time in its long history, went on the offensive. The Cathar fleet pushed deeper into the inner system, their formation tighter now, their movements sharper with frustration. They had lost ships more than they expected, and still hadn't seen a single human warship up close. No grand armada, no heroic last stand. Just silence, then sudden violence, then silence again. It gnawed at them. Their commanders barked orders, demanding answers their science officers couldn't give. How could a species so young, so scattered, fight like this? Earth didn't answer with words. It answered with action. As the Cathar crossed the orbit of Mars, the United Earth Council sent its final message.
Not a plea.
Not a threat. Just a single transmission beamed across all frequencies, unencrypted, impossible to ignore. It began with images, ordinary, peaceful images. A child chasing a dog through a sunlit field in Iowa. Fishermen hauling nets at dawn off the coast of Maine. A street musician playing guitar in a plaza in New Orleans. Students laughing in a classroom in Chicago. Farmers planting seeds in Kansas. Artists painting murals on brick walls in Detroit. Life simple and stubborn and full of quiet joy. Then, over those images, words appeared in clean white letters. We've been waiting for you. The Cathar command ship received the message. High Arbiter Vex watched it twice. He didn't understand. This wasn't the behavior of a species facing extinction. This was the behavior of one that had already decided the outcome. Before he could respond, the sky around his fleet erupted, hidden beneath Earth's oceans. Drone factories that had lain dormant for decades powered on. Thousands of autonomous units launched from secret bays along the seafloor, rising through the waves and into orbit without a sound. In geosynchronous space, cloaked platforms unfolded like steel flowers, revealing kinetic rods aimed not at ships, but at the empty space ahead of them. On the moon, Jake Mullins triggered the final sequence. The lunar grids didn't fire weapons, they fired gravity lenses, bending the paths of incoming Cathar vessels into pre-calculated kill zones, and then the Valkyrie returned. It came not from the shadows this time, but from directly above the ecliptic plane, diving like a hawk. Frank Dawson stood firm on the bridge, eyes locked on the main display. Lena fed him real-time updates, shield frequencies shifting, enemy formations breaking, comms collapsing under coordinated cyber pulses, sent from old satellite relays disguised as space junk. They think they're fighting a planet, Frank said. But we're not just a planet. We're a system. And every rock, every moon, every drop of ocean has been turned into a weapon. The Cathar tried to retreat. Too late. The inner solar system had become a maze of traps. Kinetic rods, accelerated to near light speed, struck without warning, punching through hulls before shields could react. Drone swarms latched onto enemy ships, overloading their power cores with feedback loops designed from stolen alien schematics. Even the solar wind was weaponized. Charged particles redirected by hidden magnetic fields to fry exposed circuits. One by one, Cathar ships went dark. High Arbiter Vex ordered a full withdrawal. But the fleet couldn't regroup. Their comms were jammed. Their navigation was scrambled. Their pride was shattered. For the first time in centuries, the hegemony faced something it couldn't dominate with size or strength. Earth hadn't met force with greater force. It had met force with intelligence, patience, and an understanding of its own home that no outsider could ever match. From Antarctica, Lena watched the battle unfold on her screen. She didn't cheer. She didn't smile. She simply noted each enemy ship that fell and updated the tactical map. This wasn't revenge. It wasn't hatred. It was defense, refined over generations into something precise and terrible. Jake, still in engineering, wiped sweat from his brow as the Valkyrie's core pulsed with sustained fire. "We're pushing the limits," he said over the comm. "But she's holding. She was built for this," Frank replied. Below, on Earth's surface, people watched the sky. They saw flashes of light where no stars should be. They felt the ground tremble as orbital debris burned up in the atmosphere. But there were no explosions on the ground. No cities falling. No fire raining from above. Earth was protecting itself, not by hiding but by fighting smarter. When the last Cathar capital ship lost power and drifted dead in space near Venus, the battle was over. Less than 12 hours had passed since the fleet entered the inner system. Of the 300 ships that came, fewer than 40 remained, and those were too damaged to fight or flee. Silence returned to the void. Frank ordered the Valkyrie to hold position. He opened a channel, not to gloat, not to threaten, but to speak plainly. "This is Colonel Frank Dawson of Earth. Your war is over. You may surrender. You will not be harmed." There was no reply at first. Then slowly the surviving ships powered down their weapons. One by one they broadcast a single symbol, the Cathar sign of truce. In Geneva, the Council watched in stunned silence as the news spread. Earth had won. Not by luck, not by miracle, but by choice, by preparation, by the quiet work of people who believed that peace wasn't the absence of war, but the presence of readiness. Lena finally leaned back in her chair, exhaustion washing over her. She looked at Frank. "They'll ask how we did it." He nodded. "Let them ask. Some secrets are worth keeping until the world is ready to understand them." Outside the Valkyrie's viewport, Earth turned slowly in the sunlight. Blue, whole, unbroken. The smile wasn't on any face. It was in the stillness of the oceans, the hum of the cities, the quiet strength of a species that had spent centuries learning not just how to survive, but how to protect everything it loved. The galaxy had declared war, and Earth at last had shown what it truly was. The silence after the battle was deeper than any before it. Not the silence of fear, but the quiet that comes after a storm has passed, and the world is still standing. In orbit, the wreckage of Cathar ships drifted like dark leaves on a calm sea. Rescue shuttles from Earth moved among them, not to scavenge, but to offer aid. The surviving alien crews, dazed and humbled, accepted water, medical help, and a simple message: "You are safe now." Frank Dawson stood on the observation deck of a neutral station near Titan, watching one of those shuttles dock. He wore no uniform, just a plain gray jacket and boots scuffed from years of service. Behind him, the station hummed with activity. Human engineers working alongside Cathar technicians, sharing tools, gestures, and slowly, words. It had only been 3 weeks since the battle, but already, something new was growing from the ashes of war. High Arbiter Vex approached, escorted by 2 human guards who kept a respectful distance. The alien was tall, his silver-gray skin marked with ritual scars, his eyes sharp but no longer proud. He stopped a few feet from Frank and bowed his head slightly, a gesture his people reserved for equals. "You spared us," Vex said. His voice was quieter now, stripped of its earlier certainty. "We didn't fight to destroy you," Frank replied. "We fought to protect what's ours. There's a difference." Vex looked out the viewport at Earth, a blue jewel hanging in the black. "Your species, you built weapons beyond anything we imagined, yet you showed mercy. Why?" Frank didn't answer right away. He thought of the gardens blooming in Oregon, the music playing in cafes in Nashville, the children learning to read in classrooms from Boston to San Diego. "Because peace isn't just the absence of war," he said finally. "It's the presence of something worth protecting. And we protect it not by hiding, but by being ready to defend it, without losing ourselves in the process." Vex was silent for a long time. Then he nodded. "The hegemony believed strength meant domination. You have shown us another kind. Back on Earth, life returned to its rhythm, but nothing was quite the same. People walked a little taller. They looked at the stars not with fear, but with quiet pride. The victory hadn't been loud or flashy. It had been precise, patient, and deeply human. And in the weeks that followed, Earth didn't gloat. It reached out. Lena Ortiz led the first joint science mission, working with Cathar physicists to compare energy theories and shield designs. She found their minds sharp but rigid, trained to follow doctrine rather than question it. She taught them to experiment, to fail, to try again. In return, they showed her how their empire had mapped thousands of star systems, offering data that would take humanity centuries to gather on its own. Jake Mullins helped repair Cathar ships using human engineering principles. Simpler, more adaptable, built for repair rather than perfection. He laughed when a Cathar engineer stared in disbelief as Jake fixed a broken coolant line with duct tape and spare parts from a lunar rover. "Sometimes the best solution isn't the fanciest," Jake said. The alien, after a pause, smiled. A rare thing for his kind. The United Earth Council, once divided and fearful, now spoke with one voice. They proposed a new agreement, the Accord of Shared Skies: no empires, No quarantines, no ultimatums, just open space, shared knowledge, and mutual respect. To the surprise of many, the Cathar hegemony agreed. Their defeat had cracked their arrogance, and in the crack something new had taken root. Curiosity. Frank became Earth's first interstellar envoy, though he never wanted the title. He preferred to walk among the people, listening more than speaking. At a gathering on Mars, a young Cathar student asked him what Earth's greatest weapon truly was. Frank thought for a moment, then said, "Patience. We waited, we watched, we learned. And when the time came, we acted, not out of hate, but out of love for our home." The student wrote that down in a small notebook. Later, it would be quoted across dozens of worlds. In the months that followed, human and Cathar ships traveled together. Trade routes opened. Cultural exchanges began. Artists painted side by side. Musicians blended strange new harmonies. Children from both species played in zero-gravity parks, laughing in languages they were just beginning to understand. Earth didn't change its ways. It didn't build monuments to its victory. There were no parades, no statues of heroes. Instead, people returned to their gardens, their workshops, their classrooms. They fixed roofs, baked bread, told stories. But now, when they looked up at night, they knew they were not alone, and they were not weak. Frank often walked alone on the shores of Lake Michigan, watching the sunset paint the water gold. Tourists sometimes recognized him, but they never asked for autographs. They just nodded as if to say, "We know what you did," and were grateful. He always nodded back. One evening, Lena joined him. She carried 2 cups of coffee, one black, one with cream, the way he liked it. They stood in silence for a while, watching the waves. "Do you think they'll ever try again?" she asked. "Maybe," Frank said. "But next time they'll know better. And so will anyone else who comes looking for an easy target." Lena smiled. Good. Far above them, a Cathar transport glided through the upper atmosphere, heading to a research station in orbit. Its lights blinked in a pattern that, to human eyes, looked like a greeting. To Cathar eyes, it meant peaceful passage. Both were true. Earth had smiled when war was declared, not because it wanted to fight, but because it knew it could end the fight on its own terms. And now, in the quiet aftermath, that smile remained, not on lips, but in the way streets stayed lit at night, in the way children dreamed without fear, in the way a planet that had once hidden its strength now shared its wisdom. The galaxy had learned a lesson, and Earth, ever patient, ever kind, ever ready, simply returned to living, smiling quietly, as if it had always known this day would come.